The marble halls of the Nerith royal palace stretched endlessly before Marcus Hale, each footstep of the diplomatic procession echoing like thunder in the oppressive silence. He kept his head down, following 3 paces behind Ambassador Reeves, playing his role as the invisible translator, who wasn't supposed to exist. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who once decoded enemy transmissions that saved entire fleets, now reduced to a shadow in borrowed robes. "Remember, Hale," Ambassador Reeves had hissed before they entered. "You stand there, you listen, and you keep your damn mouth shut. The Nerith don't negotiate with underlings, especially not human ones. Your furniture. Expensive. Necessary furniture. But furniture nonetheless." Marcus had nodded, swallowing the bitter taste that came with his demotion. 6 months ago, he'd been Commander Marcus Hale, intelligence officer extraordinaire. Now he was nobody, a convenient scapegoat for a war that had cost too many lives on both sides. They'd needed someone to blame for the intelligence failures. And who better than the man who knew too much, but couldn't prove his innocence without revealing classified operations that would restart the war. The throne room doors, carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight, swung open with a harmonious chime that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. The Nerith had always been ostentatious in their displays of power, their technology so advanced it looked like magic, yet wrapped in the trappings of ancient monarchy. It was like stepping into a fairy tale written by a quantum physicist. The delegation moved forward, and Marcus caught his first glimpse of the legendary Queen Sarath. She sat upon a throne that seemed to be grown, rather than built, its organic curves pulsing with a soft, bioluminescent glow. Her features were almost human, save for the subtle iridescent scales that caught the light along her cheekbones, and the eyes that held too many colors to name. She was beautiful, in the way a storm is beautiful, magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Reeves began, executing a bow that he'd practiced for weeks. "We come seeking continued peace between our peoples." Marcus tuned out the diplomatic pleasantries, his attention drawn to movement in the shadows beside the throne. A figure stepped forward, and his breath caught. It was a young woman, perhaps in her early 20s by human standards, though with the Nerith's longer lifespans. She could have been decades older. She moved with an unusual grace, her steps deliberate and measured, her eyes the same impossible colors as her mother's, scanning the room with an intensity that seemed almost desperate. Princess Lyra, Marcus realized. He'd read about her in the intelligence briefings, though the information had been sparse. The Queen's only daughter, heir to the throne of one of the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. But there was something else. Something in the way she held herself, the way her eyes tracked movement rather than sound. The realization hit him like a shock of cold water. She was deaf. Marcus watched as the princess observed the proceedings, her face a mask of polite neutrality that didn't quite hide the loneliness beneath. No one was translating for her. No one was even acknowledging her presence beyond the occasional ceremonial nod. She was as invisible as he was, trapped in her own kind of silence. Without thinking, Marcus shifted slightly, catching her attention. Their eyes met across the vast throne room, and in that moment, he saw recognition not of him personally, but of a kindred spirit, another soul relegated to the margins of this grand performance. Ambassador Reeves droned on about trade agreements and border disputes. The Queen responded with carefully measured words that her translator converted into passable standard. The court officials stood like statues, their faces revealing nothing. And, through it all, Princess Lyra watched, isolated in her soundless world. Marcus knew he should look away. He was supposed to be invisible, unimportant. Certainly not someone who made eye contact with royalty. But something in her expression held him. It was the look of someone drowning in plain sight, surrounded by people who couldn't or wouldn't throw her a lifeline. His hands moved before his brain could stop them. It was a simple gesture, one he'd learned years ago during a covert operation on Earth's colony worlds, where silence was survival. The ancient American Sign Language had become something of a universal human backup communication method, taught in military academies as a tactical tool. His fingers formed the signs slowly, carefully. "Hello, beautiful day." The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Princess Lyra's carefully composed mask shattered. Her eyes widened, filled with tears that she couldn't blink away fast enough. Her hand flew to her mouth, and a sound escaped, half sob, half laugh, that echoed through the throne room like a bell. Everything stopped. The ambassador's voice cut off mid-sentence. Every head in the throne room turned. The guards' hands moved to their weapons, elegant energy blades that could slice through steel like tissue paper. And Queen Serath rose from her throne, her expression unreadable as she looked from her daughter to Marcus. "You," the Queen's voice carried despite its softness, the translator scrambling to keep up. "The silent one in the back. Come forward." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Reeves turned to glare at him, his face purple with rage and fear. This wasn't supposed to happen. Marcus was supposed to be invisible. He'd violated the first rule of diplomatic engagement with the Nereth: never draw attention to yourself unless invited. But he had no choice now. Marcus stepped forward, his military training keeping his stride steady despite the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon him. He stopped at the appropriate distance from the throne and bowed, not the elaborate genuflection that Reeves had performed, but a simple, respectful inclination of his head. "You made signs to my daughter," Queen Serath said. It wasn't a question. Marcus hesitated. Speaking without permission could make things worse, but lying would be catastrophic. The Nereth had technology that could detect deception as easily as humans could see color. "I did, Your Majesty," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of resignation. He was already condemned. Might as well face it with dignity. "These signs, what are they?" "A form of communication from my world, Your Majesty. A language of hands and gestures, used by those who cannot hear, or in situations where silence is required." The Queen descended from her throne with liquid grace, approaching until she stood mere feet from Marcus. This close, he could see the fine patterns in her scales, like fractals repeating into infinity. Her presence was overwhelming, power radiating from her like heat from a star. "Show me again," she commanded. "What you said to her." Marcus raised his hands, moving through the signs more slowly this time. "Hello, beautiful day." He paused, then added, "I meant no disrespect, Your Majesty. You simply saw my daughter's isolation and chose to breach it," the Queen finished. "Do you know what you've done?" Marcus straightened, meeting her inhuman eyes directly. "I saw someone who needed to be seen, Your Majesty. That's all." A long moment passed. The throne room held its breath. Then, impossibly, Queen Serath smiled, an expression that transformed her face from terrible to merely terrifying. "Lord Kale," she called, and a figure emerged from the shadows. The Queen's advisor was everything Marcus had heard: tall, imposing, with scales so dark they seemed to absorb light. His eyes were cold, calculating, measuring Marcus like a butcher evaluating meat. "Clear the room. Everyone except our guests." The throne room emptied with remarkable efficiency, leaving only the human delegation, the royal family, and Lord Kale. Princess Lyra had moved closer, her eyes never leaving Marcus's hands. "Can you teach her more?" the Queen asked. And for the first time, Marcus heard something beyond royal command in her voice. He heard a mother's desperate hope. "Your Majesty," Ambassador Reeves interjected, finally finding his voice. "This man is merely a translator, hardly qualified to—" "This man," Queen Serath cut him off, "just accomplished what none of my scholars, physicians, or technology could. He spoke to my daughter in a way she could understand." She turned back to Marcus. I ask again, can you teach her? Marcus looked at Princess Lyra. She was signing something clumsily, incorrectly, but signing nonetheless. She'd picked up his simple greeting and was trying to return it. Her fingers moved through approximations of the gestures, and when she finished, she looked at him with such hope it nearly broke his heart. Yes, he said quietly. I can teach her. Your Majesty. Lord Kale's voice slithered into the conversation. This is highly irregular. We know nothing of this human's credentials, his loyalties. He could be a spy, using this performance to infiltrate the royal household. A spy who reveals his abilities within minutes of arriving, the Queen asked, amused. Either he's the worst spy in the galaxy, or he's exactly what he appears to be. She studied Marcus with those impossible eyes. Which are you? Marcus Hale. The sound of his name sent a chill down his spine. Of course she knew who he was. The Nareth's intelligence network was legendary. I'm nobody, Your Majesty, Marcus replied. Just a translator who knows how to speak without words. Nobody, the Queen repeated, tasting the word. How refreshing. My palace is full of somebodies. All of them so important they've forgotten how to see what's right in front of them. She gestured to her daughter. For 18 years, Lyra has lived in silence. The greatest minds of the Nareth couldn't find a way to bridge that gap. Our neural implants are incompatible with her unique physiology. Our telepathic enhancers cause her pain. We can reshape matter at the quantum level, but we couldn't give my daughter a voice. Princess Lyra moved closer to her mother, signing something Marcus recognized as thank you repeatedly, though directed at him rather than the Queen. Her tears had dried, but her eyes still shimmered with emotion. And then, Queen Serath continued, a nobody human makes a simple gesture, and my daughter responds with more emotion than I've seen from her in years. She turned to Ambassador Reeves. Your translator will remain here as a special advisor to the crown. He will teach my daughter this sign language and serve as her interpreter. Your Majesty, Reeves sputtered, I must protest. He is essential to our delegation. Your delegation is concluded, the Queen announced. The trade agreements are approved as proposed. The border disputes will be resolved in humanity's favor. Considerate payment for services rendered. Reeves's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. He'd spent months preparing for complex negotiations, only to have them resolved in minutes, because Marcus couldn't keep his hands still. However, Lord Kale interjected, his tone dripping with suspicion, we must insist on certain precautions. This human will be monitored at all times. Any attempt to exploit his position or harm the royal family will result in immediate execution. Agreed, Marcus said before anyone else could speak. He had nothing to lose anyway. His career was over, his reputation destroyed. At least here, he might do some good. Princess Lyra approached him directly then, moving with the confidence of someone who'd made a decision. She pointed to herself, then slowly, carefully, finger-spelled L-I-R-A in the ASL alphabet. It was wrong, she'd reversed 2 of the letters, but the effort was there. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile he'd managed in months. He corrected her gently, showing her the proper formation of each letter, then pointed to himself and spelled M-A-R-C-U-S. She repeated it, got it right on the second try, and smiled, the expression that lit up her entire face. Then she signed something he didn't expect, something she must have figured out from context and observation. Friend. The word hung in the air between them. A question and an offer rolled into one. Marcus looked at this alien princess, with her scales and impossible eyes, standing in a palace that defied physics, on a world dozens of light years from Earth. He thought about everything he'd lost, everything that had been taken from him, and he realized that sometimes the universe offered strange gifts in the wake of disaster. He raised his hands and signed back, friend. Queen Sarath watched this exchange with an expression Marcus couldn't read. Lord Kale, prepare quarters for Mr. Hale in the Tower of Communications. He'll need access to our historical databases and linguistic systems if he's going to create a comprehensive sign language for Nerith use. The Tower of Communications. Kale's voice carried a note of alarm. Your Majesty, that's within the inner palace. Surely the foreign quarters would be more appropriate. My daughter's education is not a foreign matter, the Queen said coldly. It is a royal priority. Anyone who suggests otherwise is welcome to discuss it with me privately. The threat in her tone was unmistakable. Kale bowed stiffly. As Your Majesty commands. Ambassador Reeves made one last attempt. Your Majesty, I must insist that we contact Earth's diplomatic corps about this. There are procedures. There are also consequences for wasting my time, Queen Sarath said. You've achieved more in this single audience than most delegations manage in months. Go home, Ambassador. Tell your superiors that humanity has a friend in the Nerith court. Isn't that worth more than one translator? It was a dismissal, polite but firm. Reeves knew better than to argue further. He bowed, shot Marcus a look that promised consequences if he ever returned to human space, and led the rest of the delegation out of the throne room. Marcus stood alone now, surrounded by aliens, in a palace that shouldn't exist, about to embark on a task he wasn't qualified for. It should have terrified him. Instead, he felt something he hadn't experienced since his disgraced purpose. Princess Lyra was signing at him again, a stream of improvised gestures mixed with attempts at ASL. He couldn't understand most of it, but the emotion behind it was clear. She was trying to tell him something, share something she'd never been able to express before. Patience, he signed to her, adding a gentle smile. We have time. Time, Queen Sarath repeated, having somehow understood the sign. Yes, we have time. But Mr. Hale, understand this, you've given my daughter hope. If you betray that hope, if you hurt her in any way, there isn't a force in this galaxy that will save you from my wrath. Marcus met her eyes steadily. Your Majesty, I've already lost everything that mattered to me. I was sent here as punishment, a reminder of my failures. But your daughter, she doesn't deserve to be alone in the silence. I won't fail her. Something shifted in the Queen's expression, a softening? Perhaps. Or maybe just a trick of the light. We'll see, Mr. Hale, we'll see. As Lord Kale led him out of the throne room, Marcus glanced back to see Princess Lyra still standing there, practicing the signs he'd taught her. Marcus, she fingerspelled, getting it perfect this time. Then, with a concentration that furrowed her brow, she signed, thank you. He signed back, you're welcome. The massive doors closed behind him with a resonant boom, sealing him into his new life. As he followed Lord Kale through corridors that defied geometry, Marcus reflected on the strange turns fate could take. This morning, he'd been nobody, a disgraced officer sentenced to a meaningless role. Now, he was teacher to an alien princess, holder of a trust he hadn't sought, walking through halls of power he'd never imagined entering. You're playing a dangerous game, Lord Kale said suddenly, his voice low and menacing. The Queen may be impressed by your little display, but I see through you. Whatever scheme you're running, whatever your true purpose here, I will discover it. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He'd dealt with enough suspicious officials to know that protests of innocence only fed their paranoia. Instead, he said simply, the only game I'm playing is trying to help a young woman communicate with the world around her. We shall see, Kale said, echoing the Queen's earlier words. Your quarters are here. You'll find everything you need. Guards will be posted outside for your protection. Of course, tomorrow, you'll begin your duties. I suggest you prepare carefully. The princess is fragile. If your teaching causes her distress? He didn't need to finish the threat. Marcus understood perfectly. He was balanced on a knife's edge, with potential death on either side. But as he entered his new quarters, a suite that would have housed an entire squad back on Earth, he found he didn't care about the danger. Through the crystalline windows, he could see the triple sunset of Nereth painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere in this palace, a princess was practicing signs, learning that her thoughts and feelings could finally have shape and form. He'd given her that. In all his years of service, through all his missions and operations, he'd never felt as useful as he did in that moment when Lyra's eyes lit up with understanding. Marcus moved to the window, watching alien birds wheel through the sunset. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, suspicious courtiers, and the monumental task of adapting human sign language for beings with different anatomy and cultural concepts. But tonight, for the first time in months, he had something to look forward to. A soft chime drew his attention to a panel by the door. Touching it, revealed a message in perfectly translated, standard, from Princess Lyra. "Good night, Teacher Marcus." It was signed with a small holographic recording of her attempting the ASL sign for friend. Marcus smiled, touching his fingers to his chin and extending them outward, the sign for thank you that she'd learned soon enough. He'd been told to stay quiet, to be invisible, to accept his punishment in silence. Instead, he'd spoken without words and changed everything. As the last sun dipped below the horizon, and the palace lights began their nocturnal dance, Marcus Hale, failed intelligence officer and accidental teacher, began planning tomorrow's lessons. He had a language to adapt, a princess to teach, and somehow, impossibly, a second chance at meaning something. The silence, he decided, had never been louder. The morning came too quickly, heralded by a gentle chime that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Marcus had spent half the night reviewing his knowledge of ASL, trying to figure out how to adapt it for beings with 6 fingers instead of 5. The Nereth's extra digit, positioned between what humans would call the thumb and index finger, opened up possibilities for nuance that Earth's sign language had never contemplated. A knock at his door interrupted his morning preparations. He expected guards, perhaps Lord Kale coming to impose more restrictions. Instead, Princess Lyra stood in the doorway, accompanied by a single guard who looked deeply uncomfortable with the situation. She signed good morning perfectly. She must have practiced all night. Then, with less certainty, she added, "Walk with me." Marcus glanced at the guard, who made a gesture that might have been a shrug. Apparently, when the princess wanted something, she got it. The palace in daylight was even more impossible than it had been the evening before. Corridors opened onto gardens that couldn't exist, floating water features that defied gravity, plants that sang in harmonious frequencies, paths that seemed shorter, going one direction than the other. Lyra led him through it all with the confidence of someone who'd mapped every impossible angle. They stopped at a balcony overlooking the city. The capital of Nereth sprawled below them, a mixture of organic architecture and crystalline towers that pierced the clouds. Ships moved through the air in organized patterns, looking more like schools of fish than traffic. Lyra pulled out a datapad, though calling it that did no justice to the paper-thin sheet of light she produced from apparently nowhere. She showed him words in Nereth script, then pointed at herself and signed something he didn't recognize. It took him a moment to realize she was trying to create her own signs, representing concepts that existed in her language, but not in human experience. Slowly, Marcus signed, then demonstrated. He took her hands gently, correcting the position of her fingers. "Like this." She nodded, repeating the gesture until she got it right. Then she showed him another word on the pad, something that translated roughly as the feeling of sunlight through crystal. There was no human equivalent, no sign that could capture that specific sensation. "We make a new one," Marcus signed, then showed her, how to combine existing signs to create new meaning. It was what deaf communities had done for generations, adapting, evolving, making language their own. They worked like this for hours, seated on the balcony as the morning progressed. Lyra was a quick student, absorbing everything with an intensity that spoke of years of pent-up communication. She didn't just want to learn signs. She wanted to understand the culture behind them, the way deaf humans had built entire communities around visual language. Marcus found himself telling her about Earth, about the schools where deaf children learned to sign before they could walk, about the poetry that could only exist in three-dimensional space, about the jokes that didn't translate into spoken language. Lyra's eyes widened with each revelation, and she began to share her own experiences, years of watching the world through glass, understanding everything, but unable to participate. "Lonely," she signed, a sign Marcus had taught her that morning. Then she pointed at him and signed, "You understand." He did. His own isolation had been different, but parallel, surrounded by people who saw him as a traitor, unable to defend himself without endangering others. They were both prisoners of silence, just in different ways. A commotion in the courtyard below caught their attention. A group of nobles had gathered, their voices carrying up to the balcony in heated discussion. Marcus couldn't understand the words, but the tone was universal anger, fear, accusation. Lyra's expression darkened. She signed something rapid and complex, mixing her invented signs with ASL in a way Marcus could barely follow. But he caught enough. "They argue about you, about me, about change." Before Marcus could respond, Lord Kale appeared on the balcony, as if materializing from shadow. His dark scales seemed to absorb the morning light, creating an outline of void in the bright day. "Your Highness," he said with a bow that managed to convey disapproval despite its perfect form. "The council requests your presence." Lyra stood, her posture shifting from relaxed student to royal princess in an instant. She looked at Marcus and signed, "Come." "The human is not permitted in council chambers," Kale said flatly. Lyra's response was swift and sharp. She moved through a series of gestures that weren't ASL, but pure Nereth court language, the kind of formal communication used in ceremonial contexts. Marcus didn't need to understand it, to recognize a royal command when he saw one. Kale's scales shifted color slightly, the Nereth equivalent of a flush. "Your Highness, the law is clear." Lyra interrupted him with another gesture, this one somehow even more imperious than the last. Then she turned to Marcus and signed in ASL, "You are my voice now." The council chamber was a sphere within a sphere, with delegates floating at different levels in anti-grav fields. The physics of it made Marcus slightly nauseous, but he focused on staying close to Lyra as she took her position near the center. Queen Serath sat at the apex, her expression unreadable as she watched her daughter enter with a human in tow. The argument resumed immediately, various nobles speaking in rapid Nereth. The translation devices in the room worked overtime, but they were calibrated for formal speech, not the overlapping cacophony of heated debate. Marcus caught fragments, unprecedented. "Dangerous! Corruption of royal blood." One noble, his scales a brilliant gold that marked him as old aristocracy, pointed directly at Marcus. "This human's presence is an insult to traditions that predate their species' existence. The princess should be learning proper Nereth telepathic protocols, not primitive hand gestures." Lyra's hand found Marcus's arm, squeezing slightly. She was following the argument through lip reading and context, but missing nuances. Marcus began to sign, translating as best he could, adding context where necessary. Her eyes tracked his hands with fierce concentration. "Lord Terran raises a valid concern," another noble added. "How do we know these signs aren't some form of human conditioning, a way to influence the heir to the throne?" "Because," Queen Serath's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "My daughter is smiling. For the first time in 5 years, she participated in breakfast conversation this morning. She told me about her dreams, something she's never been able to do before. The Queen's gaze swept the room. If any of you had managed to give her that gift, we wouldn't need human assistance. But the implications, Lord Terran began. The implications, the Queen interrupted, are that we've failed our princess for 18 years. A human stranger accomplished in minutes what our greatest minds couldn't achieve in decades. Perhaps it's time to acknowledge that our precious traditions have limitations. Lord Kale stepped forward, his movements calculated for maximum dramatic effect. Your Majesty speaks wisdom, as always. However, we must consider security. This human Marcus Hale is not what he seems. The chamber fell silent. Marcus felt every eye turn to him, the weight of their attention like a physical pressure. "Explain," the Queen commanded. Kale produced a holographic display with a gesture. Records appeared in the air military files, classified documents, images from the war. Marcus's stomach clenched as he recognized his own service record, though heavily edited. Commander Marcus Hale, Kale read, formerly of Earth Intelligence Division, credited with breaking the hegemony cipher system, suspected of selling those same codes back to the enemy, resulting in the massacre at Kepler Station. 1,200 deaths, court-martialed. But evidence mysteriously disappeared. Demoted and exiled, rather than executed a sentence that speaks of either powerful protection or dangerous knowledge. The chamber erupted. Nobles who had been merely suspicious were now openly hostile. Marcus saw hands moving to weapons, saw the guards shifting position. Lyra's grip on his arm tightened, and when he looked at her, he saw not shock, but curiosity. "Is this true?" Queen Sereth asked, her voice carrying despite its quiet tone. Marcus straightened, meeting her gaze directly. "The facts are true. The interpretation is not." "Elaborate." Marcus glanced at Lyra, who signed "Truth, please." He took a breath. "I broke the hegemony codes, yes. But I didn't sell them. I discovered someone else had someone in the command structure. When I tried to report it, I became the scapegoat. The real traitor needed me silenced but not dead, because I'd hidden insurance files that would activate if I died. So they destroyed my reputation instead." "Convenient," Lord Terran scoffed. "A story that can't be proven." "Actually," a new voice said from the entrance, "it can—" Everyone turned. A figure stood in the doorway, a Nerith Marcus didn't recognize. Younger than most of the council, with scales that shifted between blue and green like Earth's oceans. "Agent Silas," Queen Sereth said, surprise coloring her tone. "You're supposed to be on reconnaissance." "I was, Your Majesty. But when I heard about our new human guest, I felt compelled to return." Silas moved into the chamber with the fluid grace of a trained operative. "I've been investigating the Kepler Station massacre for 3 years. The Nerith lost people there too, a diplomatic envoy that was supposedly protected by the ceasefire. We've always suspected the attack was orchestrated by someone who wanted to restart the war." He produced his own holographic display, data streams that meant nothing to Marcus, but caused several council members to gasp. "These are communication logs from Kepler Station, recovered from a damaged Nerith escape pod. They show the attack codes being transmitted from Earth's command ship, not from any external source. The betrayal came from within human leadership, just as Hale claimed." Lord Kale's colors shifted subtle, but Marcus was learning to read Nerith body language. The advisor was disturbed by this revelation, but not surprised. "Interesting. This proves nothing about his current intentions," Kale said smoothly. "Even if he was falsely accused then, he could still be a threat now." "A threat who teaches my daughter to speak?" Queen Sereth asked. "Who asks for nothing in return? Who could have used this information as leverage but chose silence instead?" Lyra suddenly stood, moving to the center of the sphere. She began to sign not ASL, but the hybrid language she and Marcus had been developing. Marcus translated aloud, his voice carrying her words to the assembly. "I have been silent my whole life," he said, speaking her signs. "Not by choice, but by circumstance. You debate my safety, my future, as if I cannot understand, as if my deafness makes me less capable of judgment. But I see everything. I see Lord Terran's son gambling away the family fortune. I see Lady Merrix's secret meetings with off-world traders. I see Lord Kale's private communications with people you would not approve of. Mother." The chamber went deadly quiet. Lyra continued signing, and Marcus continued translating, though his mouth had gone dry. "I have kept these secrets because I had no voice to speak them. But now I do, and I choose to use it to say this: Marcus Hale is the first person to see me as complete, not broken. He doesn't pity me or try to fix me. He simply offered me a new way to exist in the world. If you exile him, you exile my voice with him." She turned to her mother, signing something Marcus didn't need to translate. The emotion in the gesture was clear, a daughter's plea to a mother, beyond politics and protocol. Queen Sereth descended from her position, floating down until she stood before Lyra. She reached out and touched her daughter's face gently, then turned to the assembly. "The decision is made. Marcus Hale remains as Royal Linguistic Advisor. Anyone who challenges this challenges the throne itself." Her gaze lingered on Lord Kale. "Is that understood?" The murmurs of agreement were reluctant, but unanimous. Even Kale bowed, though his expression promised this wasn't over. As the assembly dispersed, Agent Silas approached Marcus. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Your investigation into the Kepler Station massacre touched something bigger than you realized. The same forces that wanted you silenced then are still active, and now you're in a position where you might uncover more than they're comfortable with." Before Marcus could respond, Silas melted back into the crowd, leaving only questions in his wake. That evening, Marcus found himself in the palace's library, a vast space where information was stored in formats that ranged from ancient, crystalline matrices to quantum probability clouds. Lyra had shown him how to access the translation systems, and he was deep in research when she found him. "Thank you," she signed, "for translating, for not softening my words." "They were your words to say," Marcus signed back. She sat beside him, looking at the linguistic models he'd been constructing. "You're creating a complete language system." "Not creating," Marcus corrected. "Adapting. Your people have gestural communication already ceremonial, artistic. We're just making it practical." Lyra was quiet for a moment, then signed, "Lord Kale is planning something." Marcus nodded. He'd expected as much. "He's been in communication with someone off-world. The same signatures that appeared before the war ended. My mother doesn't know." "Why tell me?" "Because you understand secrets. And because—" She paused, her hands hovering in space as she searched for the right signs. "Because I think the war isn't really over. It just changed shape." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He'd suspected something similar the way his trial had been handled. The convenient destruction of evidence. The patterns that didn't quite fit. But hearing it confirmed by someone with access to palace intelligence made it real. "What do you want to do?" he signed. "Learn," she replied. "Everything. Your language. Yes. But also what you know. About codes. About the war. About reading people." Her eyes met his, those impossible colors shifting with determination. "They think because I'm deaf. I'm weak. Let them. While they watch for threats from outside, we'll be the threat they never see coming." Marcus studied her. This princess who was so much more than she appeared. "That's dangerous." "So is doing nothing." She stood, preparing to leave, then turned back. "Tomorrow, teach me about human humor. I want to understand your jokes."
"Why?"
She smiled, an expression that transformed her from royal heir to young woman. Because when you truly want to understand a people, you need to know what makes them laugh. As she left, Marcus remained in the library, surrounded by alien knowledge and impossible technology. He'd come here as a disgraced translator, expecting nothing but continued exile. Instead, he'd found a student who might also be an ally, a mystery that connected to his own past, and a growing certainty that his presence here wasn't as random as it seemed. Outside the library windows, Nerith's 3 moons rose in sequence, their light creating patterns on the floor that looked almost like sign language. Marcus watched them, thinking about Lyra's words. The war had changed shape, become something subtler and more dangerous. And somehow, a deaf princess and a disgraced soldier had positioned themselves at the center of it. He returned to his work, adapting human signs for alien hands. But his mind kept circling back to Agent Silas's warning. The forces that had destroyed him were still active, still moving pieces on a board he couldn't fully see. But now, he had something he hadn't had before, someone who could see in ways others couldn't, who understood the power of silence and observation. The next morning came with another surprise. Marcus was summoned to the Queen's private study, a space he hadn't known existed. Queen Sereth stood before a window that showed not the city, but the stars, a view that should have been impossible from this angle. "My daughter trusts you," she said without preamble. "That's rare. She's learned to read people out of necessity, to survive in a world that wasn't built for her. If she trusts you, there's a reason." "Your Majesty, I know Lord Kale is plotting something," she continued, cutting him off. "I've known for months, but I need him to reveal his hand, to show his true allies. Your presence has accelerated his timeline. He sees you as a threat to whatever he's planning." Marcus remained silent, processing this revelation. "I'm telling you this because my daughter is going to investigate, with or without approval. She's been watching and waiting for years, and now that she has a voice, she won't be content to stay silent." The Queen turned to face him fully. "I need you to protect her. Not from physical harm, she's more capable than she appears, but from herself. Her desire for justice might override her caution." "Why me?" "Because you've already lost everything once. You know the cost of truth. And because—" She paused, seeming to consider her words. "Because I think you were sent here for a reason. Call it fate. Call it probability. But your arrival has set things in motion that were meant to happen." She dismissed him then, but not before adding, "Teach her well, Marcus Hale. She'll need every tool you can give her for what's coming." Marcus left the study with more questions than answers. But one thing was becoming clear. His role here was evolving far beyond language teacher. He was becoming part of something larger, a game whose rules he didn't fully understand, but whose stakes were becoming increasingly apparent. That afternoon, he met Lyra in their usual spot on the balcony. She was practicing signs, her movements becoming more fluid and natural. When she saw him, she signed, "Ready for lesson." "Always," he signed back. But as they began working, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not by the obvious guards or surveillance systems, but by something else, something that had been watching since before he arrived. The war might have ended, but the players were still on the board, still moving towards some inevitable confrontation. And somehow, he and a deaf princess were right in the middle of it, armed with nothing but signs and secrets, preparing for a battle that would be fought in silence. 3 weeks into his new life, Marcus discovered the palace had secrets even Lyra didn't know about. He found the first one by accident, reaching for a linguistic text in the library when his hand passed through what should have been solid wall. The holographic concealment flickered, revealing a hidden alcove containing data crystals that pulsed with an inner light. "Don't touch those," Lyra signed from behind him, making him jump. She moved with disturbing silence when she chose to. Old archives, from before the war. How did you know I was here? She smiled. That expression that made her look less like royalty, and more like a young woman with mischief on her mind. I followed you. You have a tell, when you're thinking hard, you tap your right thumb against your leg. You've been doing it all morning. Marcus hadn't realized she'd been observing him that closely. What had me thinking? The same thing that has me worried. She moved closer, her signs becoming smaller, more private. Kyle met with someone last night, in the old communications tower, the one that's supposedly sealed. How do you... I read lips through walls, she signed, then clarified at his confused expression. Thermal imaging integrated with motion analysis. A gift from my mother when I was 12. She thought it would help me feel less isolated. She didn't realize it would let me see through most of the palace's privacy screens. Marcus filed that information away. The princess had capabilities no one suspected. What did they discuss? Lyra's expression darkened. Numbers, coordinates, and a date 3 days from now. Something's happening during the Harmony Festival. The Harmony Festival was Nereth's celebration of the war's end, when delegates from dozens of worlds would gather in the capital. Security would be overwhelming, but also stretched thin. It would be the perfect time for something. We need to tell your mother. Tell her that her trusted advisor is having secret meetings she already knows. That something might happen at the festival without specifics. She can't act without causing panic or showing her hand. Lyra's frustration was evident in the sharp movements of her signs. We need proof, real evidence. Marcus understood her frustration. He'd been in similar positions during his intelligence days, knowing something was wrong, but lacking the concrete evidence to act on it. The old communications tower, he signed thoughtfully. If it's supposedly sealed, but Kale is using it. There might be records, Lyra finished. But it's in the restricted section. Even I can't access it without triggering alarms. But a maintenance worker might... Lyra's eyes widened. You want to infiltrate the tower? Not me. Us. You know the palace better than anyone. I know how to find and extract information. Together we might start a diplomatic incident, she signed, but she was smiling. When? Tonight, during the dinner reception. Everyone important will be there, including Kale. That evening, as the palace filled with pre-festival guests, Marcus and Lyra made their way through service corridors she'd mapped over years of exploration. She'd acquired maintenance coveralls that adjusted to fit their different physiologies, another marvel of Nereth technology that Marcus didn't have time to appreciate. The tower was exactly as advertised ancient by Nereth standards. Its technology decades old, but still functional. The seals on the door were intact, but Lyra produced a device that looked like crystallized light and ran it along the frame. The seals flickered and died without triggering any alarms. How? I borrowed it from Agent Silas's quarters. She signed with a mischievous grin. He left his door unlocked, careless of him. Marcus suspected Silas had been anything but careless, but there was no time to discuss it. They slipped inside, finding themselves in a cylindrical room lined with defunct communication equipment. Everything was covered in dust except for a single console that hummed with active power. Marcus approached it carefully, his old training kicking in. The interface was in Nereth script, but Lyra translated rapidly, her fingers flying through explanations. The console had been used recently and frequently, its logs showing communications with ships in deep space. Coordinates that meant nothing to Marcus, but made Lyra's scales shift to an alarmed purple hue. These are military positions, she signed. Kale's been transmitting our defense grid layouts to someone. Marcus felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just conspiracy, it was treason on a massive scale. He pulled out a data storage device he'd hidden in his coveralls, one of the few pieces of human tech he'd been allowed to keep. It was antiquated by Nereth standards, which meant their security systems wouldn't recognize it as a threat. As he downloaded the files, Lyra kept watch, her enhanced vision penetrating the walls around them. Suddenly, she grabbed his arm. "Someone's coming. 3 guards moving fast." They had seconds. Marcus yanked the device free, the download only partially complete. Lyra was already moving toward a ventilation grate that shouldn't have been large enough for either of them. She touched it with the borrowed device, and it expanded like liquid metal, creating an opening just large enough to squeeze through. They crawled through ducts that seemed to reshape themselves around them, Lyra leading with confidence born from years of secret exploration. Behind them, they heard guards enter the tower, voices raised in alarm. Their infiltration had been discovered. They emerged in a storage room 3 levels down, covered in dust and whatever passed for cobwebs on Nereth. Lyra quickly shed her maintenance coveralls, revealing her formal dinner attire beneath. Marcus did the same, though his human formal wear looked shabby compared to her luminescent gown. "We need to get to the reception," she signed. "Establish alibis." They separated, entering the grand hall from different directions. Marcus tried to calm his racing heart as he took his position along the wall with the other translators and lesser functionaries. Across the room, Lyra glided between delegates with practiced grace, every inch the princess. Lord Kale was there, holding court with a group of military officials. His dark scales gleamed in the light of floating luminescent orbs, and his expression showed no sign of concern. Either he didn't know about the tower breach yet, or he was an exceptional actor. Queen Sereth caught Marcus's eye from across the room. Something in her expression suggested she knew exactly what they'd been doing. She raised her glass, slightly, a toast or a warning. He couldn't tell. The evening proceeded with painful normalcy. Speeches were made about peace and prosperity. Delegates from former enemy states stood side by side, pretending years of war could be forgotten over canapes and imported wine. Marcus translated when needed, his hands steady despite the data device burning like a coal in his pocket. It was nearly midnight when things went wrong. Marcus was signing a conversation between Lyra and a delegate from the outer colonies when Lord Kale appeared at his shoulder. "Mr. Hale," he said smoothly, "might I have a word?" It wasn't a request. Marcus excused himself and followed Kale to a side chamber, very aware of the guards who materialized to block the exit behind them. "You've been busy," Kale said without preamble. "Teaching our princess, yes, but also exploring." "I'm not sure what you mean." "Please, let's not insult each other's intelligence." Kale circled him slowly, like a predator evaluating prey. "The tower's security systems recorded your biological signature. Human DNA is quite distinctive." Marcus said nothing. Denial would be pointless, but admission would be fatal. "The question," Kale continued, "is what to do about it. Executing you would be simple, but it would upset the princess, and through her, the queen. So I propose an alternative." "I'm listening." "You're going to help me save this empire." Marcus couldn't hide his surprise. Of all the things Kale might have said, that wasn't on the list. "The war never ended," Kale explained. "It merely paused. The hegemony is regrouping, preparing for a final assault. Our intelligence networks have confirmed it. The Queen, in her desire for peace, refuses to see the threat. She's disbanded half our fleet, reduced military spending, opened our borders to potential infiltrators." "So you're what's staging a coup?" "I'm preparing a defense. The communications you discovered there with loyal generals who understand the threat. The coordinate safe zones where our people can retreat when the attack comes." It was plausible, almost believable. But Marcus had spent too many years in intelligence to take anything at face value. "And you need me, why?" "Because you know the truth about Kepler Station. You know the hegemony has agents embedded in human command. And you have the princess's ear. She trusts you. Through her, we can convince the Queen to act before it's too late. Or you could be the embedded agent, preparing to hand Nereth to the enemy." Kale's scales flashed through a spectrum of colors: anger, frustration, and something else. Fear. 3 days, he said finally. During the Harmony Festival, the hegemony will reveal itself. When they do, you'll see I was right, and then you'll have a choice: stand with those who saw it coming, or fall with those who refused to look. He left Marcus alone in the chamber, the guards withdrawing with him. Marcus stood there for a long moment, processing what he'd heard. Then he felt a hand on his arm. Lyra materialized from what he'd thought was an empty corner, her natural camouflage abilities allowing her to blend with the walls when she stood still. "I followed you," she signed. "Heard everything. What do you think?" "I think he's scared, but not of the hegemony." She paused, her hands hesitating over the next signs. "I've been tracking the communications from the tower for weeks. The signatures don't match any known hegemony frequencies. They match something else, something from Earth's military command." Marcus felt the floor drop out from under him. "That's impossible. Earth is neutral now." "Earth's government is neutral. But the same people who betrayed you, who caused Kepler Station, what if they're still active? What if they're working with someone here?" The implications were staggering. A conspiracy that crossed species lines, that had been operating since before the war's end, and they were standing in the middle of it. "We need to warn your mother." "Not yet," Lyra signed. "Kale said 3 days. Whatever's planned. It happens at the festival. If we act too soon, they'll adjust their plans. But if we wait, prepare, we can catch them in the act." She nodded, then surprised him by stepping closer. "Marcus, whatever happens, I want you to know." Her hands paused, searching for words. "You gave me a voice. But more than that, you gave me hope. That things could change. That I could be more than the silent princess." "You were never just that," Marcus signed back. "You were always watching, learning, preparing. I just gave you the tools to share what you already knew." She smiled, that expression that transformed her face and made his heart do uncomfortable things in his chest. Then she leaned up and kissed his cheek, a gesture that transcended species and culture in its simplicity. "For luck," she signed, then disappeared back into the reception before he could respond. The next 2 days passed in tense preparation. Marcus and Lyra continued their public lessons, maintaining the facade of normalcy. But in private, they worked with Agent Silas, who had appeared in Marcus's quarters the night after the confrontation with Kale. "I've been investigating the same conspiracy," he admitted. "The Queen knows she's been letting it develop, hoping to identify all the players. But Kale's accelerated timeline concerns me." "You think he's planning something for the festival?" "I think someone is planning something, and Kale either knows about it or is part of it. Either way, we need to be ready." They developed contingency plans, established communication protocols, prepared for a dozen different scenarios. Marcus found himself falling back into the role of intelligence officer, skills he'd thought buried resurfacing with disturbing ease. The night before the festival, he couldn't sleep. He stood on his balcony, watching the city prepare for celebration, when Lyra joined him. "Scared," she signed. "Terrified," he admitted. "Good. Means you're sane." She stood beside him, their shoulders touching. "Marcus, I need to tell you something about what I found in the old archives." She produced a data crystal, its surface swirling with imprisoned light. "This is from 20 years ago, before I was born. It's a communication between my mother and someone in Earth's military. They were planning something together, an alliance that went beyond the public treaties." Marcus took the crystal, feeling its weight negligible physically, enormous in implication. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Lyra continued, "I think it's connected to this, to decisions made before either of us understood the game we were playing." "Then we change the game," Marcus signed. "That's what humans do. When the rules don't favor us, we make new ones." She laughed, a sound he'd rarely heard from her. beautiful in its genuineness. Is that what you're doing with me, making new rules? We both are. A deaf princess and a disgraced soldier, rewriting the laws of communication and connection. She turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the city lights. When this is over, when the truth comes out, what will you do? That depends. On what? On whether you still need a teacher? I'll always need you, she signed, then caught herself. As a teacher, and more. The moment stretched between them, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. Then Lyra stepped back, her royal training reasserting itself. Tomorrow, she signed. Whatever happens, we face it together. Marcus nodded, watching her leave. Tomorrow, the festival would begin, and with it, whatever trap had been laid. But tonight, they had truth and trust and the beginnings of something that transcended politics and conspiracy. The data crystal pulsed in his hand, its secrets waiting to be revealed. Marcus thought about Kale's words, about the Queen's hidden knowledge, about the connections between Earth and Nerith that ran deeper than anyone suspected. The war might not be over, but the battlefield had changed, and tomorrow, in the midst of celebration, the real conflict would finally reveal itself. Marcus went inside to prepare. He had weapons to check, plans to review, and a princess to protect. But more than that, he had a truth to uncover, one that connected to his own past and might determine everyone's future. The festival was coming, and with it, answers to questions he'd never thought to ask. But as he'd learned since arriving on Nerith, the most important communications often happened in silence, in the spaces between words where truth lived. Tomorrow, the silence would break. And when it did, Marcus intended to be ready with a voice of his own, one that spoke not just for himself, but for all those who'd been forced into shadows and silence by those who thought power meant the right to control truth. The game was about to change, and Marcus Hale, failed soldier and accidental teacher, was ready to play. The Harmony Festival dawned with all three of Nerith's sons, visible in the sky, a rare alignment that happened only once every 6 years. The palace grounds transformed overnight into a wonderland of floating gardens and impossible architecture. Delegates from 40 worlds mingled in the courtyard, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of sounds, colors, and gestures that Marcus found almost overwhelming. He stood at his assigned position near the main platform, ostensibly there to translate but actually scanning every face, every movement, looking for signs of the threat they knew was coming. Lyra was with her mother on the royal dais, resplendent in ceremonial robes that shifted color with each movement. She caught his eye and signed subtly, "Nothing yet." The morning proceeded with painful normalcy. Traditional dances were performed, each species contributing their own cultural displays. A group of human colonists performed an ancient earth dance that made Marcus unexpectedly homesick. He hadn't realized how much he missed the simple, unaugmented humanity of his own kind. It was during the Nerith historical reenactment that things began to unravel. The performers were depicting the first contact between Nerith and humanity 50 years ago, a meeting that had nearly ended in disaster before communication was established. Marcus watched with half his attention. The other half focused on Lord Kale, who had been unusually absent from the morning's festivities. Then he saw a performer who moved wrong. Their costume was perfect, their position correct, but something in their gait set off every alarm in Marcus's head. He'd seen that walk before, that particular way of distributing weight that came from years of military training. He began moving through the crowd, trying to get closer without attracting attention. As he did, he spotted another anomaly, a server whose tray never emptied, who kept circling back to the same positions. Then another, a guard whose weapon sat differently in its holster, as if it were a different model than the standard issue. Marcus's hand moved to his earpiece, A gift from Silas that morning. We have infiltrators. At least 12. Possibly more. Confirmed. Silas's voice came back. I count 15. They're positioning themselves around the Wait. Something's happening at the North Gate. An explosion rocked the palace grounds. Not massive, but precisely placed to create maximum chaos. The crowd panicked, delegates scattering in all directions. In the confusion, the infiltrators moved with purpose, converging on the royal dais. Marcus fought through the fleeing crowd, his eyes locked on Lyra and the Queen. He saw Kale emerge from nowhere, his personal guard forming a protective circle. But were they protecting or imprisoning the royals? Then he saw the weapon, an Earth-designed neural disruptor, illegal in every civilized system, being raised toward Queen Serath by one of the disguised performers. Marcus didn't think. His body moved on pure instinct, launching himself across the space. The disruptor fired, its invisible beam designed to shut down higher brain functions, leaving the victim alive but vegetative. Marcus took the hit meant for the Queen. The world exploded into agony. Every nerve in his body fired at once, his consciousness fragmenting into 1,000 pieces. He was dimly aware of falling, of Lyra's scream, actual sound, not signs of chaos erupting around him. Then darkness claimed him. He woke in pieces. First came the awareness of pain, not the sharp agony of the disruptor, but a deep, bone-level ache that suggested his nervous system had been put through a blender. Then came sound voices arguing in Nereth, the universal hum of medical equipment, and underneath it all, a rhythmic tapping. The tapping resolved into a pattern he recognized. Morse code. Ancient Earth military communication. Someone was spelling out, "Wake up, soldier." Marcus forced his eyes open, immediately regretting it as light stabbed into his brain. When his vision cleared, he found himself in what looked like a medical bay, but one that had been converted into a makeshift command center. Lyra sat beside his bed, her fingers still tapping out the code on his arm. "About time," she signed when she saw his eyes focus. "You've been unconscious for 6 hours." The Queen, "Alive, thanks to you." Her expression was complex relief, anger, fear, and something else. The disruptor would have killed her. Nereth physiology can't handle that kind of neural disruption. But humans, she paused. Your redundant neural pathways absorbed most of the damage. You'll recover. The attack failed, partially. Agent Silas approached from across the room. We captured most of the infiltrators. They were a mix, some hegemony remnants, some human mercenaries, and surprisingly, some Nereth dissidents. Kyle. Under house arrest, Queen Serath said, entering the medical bay with a contingent of guards. She looked older, worn down by the day's events. He claims he was trying to protect us, that he knew about the attack and was positioning his forces to counter it. Without proof otherwise, I can't move against him directly. Marcus tried to sit up, his head spinning. The data from the tower shows communication with unknown parties, but nothing definitively linking him to the attack. The Queen's frustration was evident. He's too clever for that. Your Majesty, Lyra signed, then spoke aloud, her voice rough, from disuse but clear. There's something you need to see. Everyone turned to stare. Lyra speaking was rarer than the triple sunrise. She produced the data crystal she'd shown Marcus the night before. This was in the old archives, a communication between you and Admiral Harrison of Earth Command, dated 20 years ago. The Queen's scales shifted to a color Marcus had never seen before, something between shame and resignation. You weren't supposed to find that. But I did. And it explains everything. Lyra's voice grew stronger. You made a deal. Earth would provide intelligence on the hegemony in exchange for Nereth technology. But something went wrong. The technology was weaponized, the Queen admitted. What we gave Earth to defend themselves became the tools of oppression. The neural disruptors, the bioweapons, all of it traced back to our exchange. She looked at Marcus. Your Admiral Harrison was part of it. He used Nereth technology to conduct illegal experiments on prisoners of war. Marcus felt his world tilt. Harrison had been his commanding officer, the man who'd ultimately betrayed him over Kepler Station. But Harrison died 5 years ago, Marcus said. No, Silas corrected. He disappeared 5 years ago, along with a significant portion of Earth's black budget and several prototype weapons. He pulled up a holographic display. We've been tracking someone calling themselves the Architect, someone who's been orchestrating conflicts across the galaxy, playing species against each other. We think it's Harrison. And Kale is working with him, Lyra added. I found the final piece while you were unconscious. She showed them another data stream. Kale's been receiving payments from Earth accounts that trace back to the same black budget Harrison stole. The pieces clicked into place in Marcus's mind. Harrison needs the war to restart. He's been profiting from it, selling weapons to all sides. Kale wants power and sees Harrison as his path to the throne. They orchestrated this attack to destabilize the peace, to make the Queen look weak. But they didn't count on you, Lyra said, her hand finding his. A disgraced soldier who wasn't supposed to matter. Queen Serath stood silently for a moment, processing everything. Then she turned to her guards. Bring Kale, now. While they waited, Marcus forced himself fully upright, his body protesting every movement. Lyra helped him, her touch gentle but sure. You didn't have to take that hit, she signed when the others weren't looking. Yes, I did, he signed back. Protecting your family protects you. And you. He paused, searching for the right signs. You matter more than you know. Before she could respond, Kale was brought in, his scales radiating indignation. Your Majesty, this treatment is... Enough, the Queen cut him off. We have evidence of your communications with Earth criminals, your involvement in today's attack, your treason. Kale's expression didn't change. Evidence can be fabricated, especially by a human with every reason to deflect suspicion from himself. Then, let's ask the source directly, Marcus said, pulling himself to his feet despite the pain. You're expecting extraction. Aren't you? Harrison promised to get you out when things went bad. Something flickered in Kale's eyes. Marcus continued, drawing on every interrogation technique he knew. But here's what you don't know. Harrison never extracts assets. He eliminates them. Kepler Station had 3 of his agents embedded. All died in the attack, an attack he orchestrated. You're lying. Am I check your extraction protocols? I bet they involve you being in a specific location, at a specific time. Isolated. Vulnerable. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping. You're not his ally, Kale. You're his cleanup. Kale's composure finally cracked. His scales shifted rapidly through colors of uncertainty and fear. He said the Queen was weak, that she'd lead us to destruction, that only strong leadership could save Nereth. And you believed him. Queen Serath's voice was ice. You believed an alien criminal over your own people. I believed in survival, Kale snapped. The hegemony is regrouping. Other threats are emerging. We need strength, not this. This capitulation to lesser species. Lesser species, Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying new authority. Like the humans who just saved your queen. Like the allies who've brought us technology and trade. Your prejudice blinds you to reality. Kale turned to her with contempt. And you would know about blindness, wouldn't you? The broken princess who... He never finished the sentence. Marcus's fist connected with his jaw, sending the advisor sprawling. It was a stupid move, his body screamed in protest, and the guards immediately raised their weapons. But Lyra's hand on his arm stopped them from firing. Enough, Queen Serath commanded. Kale, you're under arrest for treason. You'll be held pending full investigation. She turned to Silas. I want every communication traced, every connection mapped. Find Harrison. As Cale was dragged away, still protesting, an alarm began blaring through the palace. A guard rushed in, speaking rapidly in Nereth. The Queen's expression turned grim. Ships are entering our system, Earth military vessels, but not responding to hails. Marcus felt his blood run cold. Harrison's coming himself. He's not just trying to restart the war, he wants to conquer Nereth directly. Our defenses, Silas began. Won't work, Marcus interrupted. If Harrison has been planning this for years, he knows every weakness. He probably helped design half your defensive systems through Cale. Then, what do we do? The Queen asked. And for the first time, Marcus heard real fear in her voice. Marcus looked at Lyra, an idea forming. We do what humans do best. We improvise. And we use the one advantage Harrison doesn't know about your daughter's ability to see what others miss. Lyra understood immediately. The palace's hidden systems, the ones even Cale doesn't know about. She turned to her mother. You had secondary defenses installed, didn't you? After the first Earth exchange went wrong? The Queen nodded slowly. Systems that were never networked, never documented. But they're incomplete. They were designed for a threat that never materialized. Then we complete them, Marcus said. How long until Harrison's ships arrive? 3 hours at current speed, Silas reported. Then we have 3 hours to save the planet. Marcus turned to Lyra. I need you to show me everything. Every hidden system. Every secret passage. Every capability this palace has that's not on any schematic. Lyra nodded, already moving. Follow me. What followed was the most intense 3 hours of Marcus's life. Despite his injuries, he pushed through, working with Lyra and a hastily assembled team of engineers to activate and modify systems that had been dormant for 2 decades. The palace, it turned out, was more than just a seat of government. It was a fortress designed by paranoid architects who'd anticipated betrayal from within and without. Lyra's knowledge was encyclopedic. Years of exploration, of watching and learning in silence, had given her an understanding of the palace that no one else possessed. She guided them through hidden control rooms, showed them manual overrides that bypassed the main systems, revealed weapons that had been disguised as decorative elements. Your ancestors were devious, Marcus commented, as they activated a network of hidden energy shields. They had to be, Lyra signed, her voice tired from speaking. Survival demanded it. 2 hours in, they received word that Harrison's ships had accelerated. They had 30 minutes, not 60. Marcus felt the pressure mounting, but Lyra remained calm, her hands steady as she reconfigured defensive grids with an intuition that bordered on prescient. How are you doing this? He asked. She smiled. Pattern recognition. It's what I've done my whole life watching, understanding how things connect. These systems follow a logic, a philosophy of defense. Once you understand that, she made a final adjustment, and suddenly, the entire palace hummed with power. Harrison's ships dropped out of hyperspace precisely on schedule. Marcus watched from the command center as 12 vessels, all Earth military, all reported destroyed or decommissioned, took position around Nereth. Surrender communication incoming, Silas announced. Harrison's face appeared on the main screen. He was older than Marcus remembered, scarred by years of hiding, but his eyes held the same cold ambition that had led him to sacrifice 1,200 people at Kepler Station. Your Majesty, Harrison began with mock courtesy. Your advisor Cale was supposed to ensure a smooth transition, but it seems there have been complications. No matter. Surrender now, and I promise minimal casualties. Counteroffer, Queen Sarath replied. Leave our system immediately, and we won't demonstrate what 20 years of preparation looks like. Harrison laughed. You're bluffing. I know every defense this planet has." "No," Lyra said, stepping into view. "You know what we wanted you to know." She made a gesture, and the palace's hidden systems came online. Energy shields flickered into existence, not around the palace, but around Harrison's ships. Weapons emerged from what had seemed like solid rock. The entire city revealed itself to be one massive defensive installation. "Impossible," Harrison breathed. "Improbable," Marcus corrected, stepping beside Lyra. "But humans aren't the only species that can plan for betrayal. The Nereth have been playing this game for millennia." Harrison's eyes locked on Marcus. "Hale, I should have killed you when I had the chance." "Yes, you should have. But you needed a scapegoat more than you needed me dead. Mistake." Marcus pulled up the data they'd retrieved. "We have everything, Admiral. Every transaction, every communication, every crime. It's being transmitted to Earth, to the hegemony, to every civilized world. Your war profiteering ends today." Harrison's face contorted with rage. "Fire all weapons, destroy them!" His ships opened fire, but the energy shields held. The palace's hidden weapons returned fire with precision, targeting engines and weapon systems, rather than destroying the ships outright. It was a surgical strike, demonstrating power, while minimizing casualties, the exact opposite of Harrison's brutal methods. The battle lasted less than 10 minutes. When it ended, Harrison's fleet was disabled, floating helplessly in space. Nereth security forces were already boarding, arresting the crews who were, for the most part, relieved to surrender. They'd been following Harrison out of fear, not loyalty. Harrison himself was brought to the palace in restraints. His empire collapsed, his plans in ruins. As he was led past Marcus, he stopped. "You could have been great," Harrison said. "I offered you power, position. You offered me shame," Marcus replied. "I prefer honor, even in disgrace." After Harrison was taken away, the palace slowly returned to something resembling normal. The festival was canceled, obviously, but there was a sense of celebration nonetheless. They'd survived, uncovered the conspiracy, and proved that the alliance between Earth and Nereth could withstand even betrayal from within. That evening, Marcus found himself back on the balcony, where he'd first taught Lyra to sign. She joined him, moving with the quiet grace he'd come to love. "We did it," she signed. "You did it," he corrected. "Your knowledge, your intuition, your courage." "Our victory," she insisted. Then added something in the hybrid sign language they'd developed. It was complex, layered, meaning roughly two people from different worlds creating something new together. Marcus understood she meant more than just the language. Queen Sereth appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Hale, a word." Marcus followed her inside, leaving Lyra on the balcony. The Queen led him to a private chamber, where she turned to face him. "You saved my life, my daughter's life, my kingdom." She paused. "Earth's government is offering to restore your commission, your honors. You could return as a hero." Marcus had been expecting this, and I'm asking you to stay. Not as a translator or teacher, but as advisor to the crown. We need someone who understands both worlds, who can help us navigate the complexities ahead. She paused. "And my daughter needs you. She's found her voice, but she's also found something else with you." Marcus looked back toward the balcony where Lyra waited. "Your Majesty, the differences between us are significant but not insurmountable. Love has bridged greater gaps than species." The Queen's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight, but know that you have a home here, if you choose it." She left him alone with his thoughts. Marcus returned to the balcony, where Lyra was watching the three moons rise. "My mother offered you a position," she said aloud, her voice growing stronger with each use. "She did." "Will you accept?" Marcus turned to her, taking in her alien beauty, her fierce intelligence, her courage that had nothing to do with sound and everything to do with spirit. "That depends," he said, then switched to signs. "On whether my student still needs a teacher." Lyra smiled. That expression that had first cracked his professional composure weeks ago. "Not a teacher," she signed back. "A partner. In language, in life, in whatever comes next." Marcus felt the weight of decision, but also its inevitability. Earth held nothing for him but vindication for crimes he hadn't committed. Here, on Nerith, he had purpose, connection, and the possibility of something he'd never thought to find in exile. "Then yes," he said simply. Lyra's smile widened, and she pulled him into an embrace that transcended species, culture, and all the impossibilities that should have kept them apart. Over her shoulder, Marcus could see the city lights beginning to pulse. In celebration, news of Harrison's defeat was spreading. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The conspiracy had been larger than just Harrison and Kale. There would be trials, rebuilding, the delicate work of restoring trust between worlds. But tonight, standing on an impossible balcony in an alien palace, holding someone who'd become essential to his existence, Marcus Hale allowed himself a moment of peace. The war was truly over, and in its place, something new was beginning, a future written in signs and symbols, in the silent language of connection that needed no words to be understood. In the distance, fireworks began, the festival finally finding expression, despite the day's chaos. Each burst painted the sky in colors humans had no names for, creating patterns that looked almost like sign language against the stars. "Beautiful," Lyra signed. "Yes," Marcus agreed, though he wasn't looking at the sky. The trial of Admiral Harrison lasted 3 weeks. Representatives from 40 worlds gathered in Nerith's Great Hall of Justice, a crystalline dome that captured and reflected the thoughts of all present, a Nerith technology that made lying nearly impossible. Marcus testified on the second day, his words carrying the weight of years of deception finally brought to light. The Kepler Station massacre was never about military advantage. He told the assembled court, it was about profit. Harrison sold the defense codes to the highest bidder, then eliminated everyone who could expose him. 1,200 people died so he could fund his private empire. Harrison sat in the defendant's sphere, his face a mask of cold fury. When given the chance to respond, he spoke only once. "I did what was necessary for humanity's survival. The weak peace you celebrate will be our doom." The verdict was unanimous guilty on all counts. Harrison was sentenced to life imprisonment on a penal colony, where he would be kept in complete isolation, a fitting punishment for a man who had orchestrated so much death from the shadows. Lord Kale's trial was more complex. His actions had been treasonous, but they'd been motivated by genuine, if misguided, concern for Nerith's security. In the end, Queen Sereth showed mercy. Kale was stripped of all titles and positions, but allowed to live in exile on Nerith's outer colonies, where he might find redemption in service to those he'd once dismissed as lesser citizens. Through it all, Marcus and Lyra worked to establish what they'd started to call the Silent Voice Initiative. Using the hybrid sign language they'd developed, they began training interpreters who could work across species lines. The language grew beyond its origins, incorporating gestures from a dozen different cultures, becoming something truly universal. One morning, 6 weeks after Harrison's defeat, Marcus was reviewing applications for the initiative when Silas appeared in his office, a space in the Tower of Communications that had been completely renovated to serve as the initiative's headquarters. "We need to talk," Silas said without preamble. "About who you really are." Marcus set down his tablet. "I thought we'd covered that during the trial." "We covered what you did, not who you are." Silas produced a datapad that Marcus recognized his own, the one he'd used to download files from the tower. "You encrypted this with a cipher I've only seen once before, a cipher created by someone called the Ghost." Marcus kept his expression neutral. Never heard of them. No. The ghost was a legend in intelligence circles. Someone who could break any code, infiltrate any system, who saved countless lives through operations that officially never happened. They say the ghost disappeared 5 years ago, right around the time Commander Marcus Hale was court-martialed. Coincidence? Silas smiled. Perhaps. But the ghost left something behind. A collection of files, hidden in quantum storage across multiple worlds. Files that contained evidence of corruption at the highest levels of multiple governments. Files that were released automatically when certain conditions were met, like Admiral Harrison's arrest. Marcus remained silent. Those files have led to 38 arrests across 12 worlds. War profiteers, corrupt officials, collaborators who worked with Harrison. The Ghost's final operation, executed from beyond their operational death. Silas stood. I just wanted to say thank you. From all of us who work in the shadows to keep the light burning. After Silas left, Marcus sat alone for a moment, processing. His past was finally, truly behind him. The ghost could rest. A hand touched his shoulder, and he turned to find Lyra reading his expression with her uncanny accuracy. Secrets, she signed. Old ones, dead ones. He took her hand. Nothing that matters now. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. Good, because we have a future to build. That evening, Queen Serath called a formal assembly. The Great Hall was packed with delegates, dignitaries, and citizens of Nereth. Marcus stood with the royal household, wearing the formal robes of a crown advisor, a position that still felt surreal. We gather tonight not in sorrow for what was nearly lost, but in celebration of what has been found. The Queen began. The conspiracy that sought to divide us has instead united us. The silence that once separated us has become a bridge. She gestured to Lyra, who stepped forward. In the weeks since finding her voice, she'd grown in confidence, her presence commanding attention in a way that had nothing to do with her royal status. For 18 years, I lived in a world apart, Lyra said, her voice clear and strong. I watched, I learned, but I could not fully participate. That isolation gave me perspective, taught me to see what others missed. But it also taught me loneliness. She turned to Marcus. Then someone saw me. Not the broken princess, not the silent heir, but simply me. He offered me a language, but more than that. He offered me understanding. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks as every eye in the hall turned to him. The Silent Voice Initiative will ensure that no one in our empire suffers in isolation, Lyra continued. Communication is not just about words, it's about connection, understanding, the bridge between one consciousness and another. We will build those bridges, one sign at a time. The crowd erupted in applause, an interesting experience for someone announcing a silent language initiative. But Lyra wasn't finished. There's something else, she said, glancing at her mother, who nodded. In human tradition, there's a concept called engagement, a formal declaration of intent to bond. In Nereth culture, we have the joining ceremony, where two souls pledge to navigate the cosmos as one. She turned fully to Marcus. I would like to do both. The hall fell silent. Marcus felt his heart stop, then restart at double speed. Lyra was standing before him, crowned princess of Nereth, publicly declaring her intention to marry a human, a former disgraced officer, no less. Lyra, he started to sign, then switched to voice. The political implications are mine to handle, she interrupted. The question is simple. Will you join with me, not as teacher and student, not as princess and advisor, but as equals? Marcus looked around the hall, seeing a mixture of shock, disapproval, and surprisingly, hope on various faces. Then he looked at Queen Serath, who gave him the slightest nod permission and blessing combined. But ultimately, he looked at Lyra. Brilliant, brave Lyra, who had turned her limitation into strength, who saw everything and understood more, who had given him purpose when he'd lost everything. "Yes," he said simply, then signed it for emphasis. "Yes, of course, yes." The hall erupted again, this time in a mixture of celebration and heated discussion. An interspecies royal marriage was unprecedented. It would change everything: succession laws, diplomatic protocols, the very nature of what it meant to be Nereth. But as Lyra pulled him into an embrace, Marcus found he didn't care about any of that. Let the politicians sort out the details. He had found something worth fighting for, worth staying for, worth building a future around. The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Not just for the wedding, though, that was complex enough, requiring the merger of human and Nereth traditions, but for the larger changes rippling through society. The Silent Voice Initiative expanded rapidly, with schools opening on 12 worlds. The hybrid sign language, officially named Universal Sign, became a required course in diplomatic training. Marcus split his time between his official duties and working with Lyra to document and codify the language they'd created. It was during one of these sessions that she made her next revelation. "I've been accepted to speak at the Galactic Council," she told him. The first address in Universal Sign, translated simultaneously into 40 languages. "What will you speak about?" "The conspiracy. But more than that, how it represents old thinking. Harrison and Kale believed in dominance, in zero-sum games where one species could only rise by pushing others down. But look what we've accomplished by working together." She pulled up displays showing the developments of the past months. Trade between Earth and Nereth had quadrupled. Technology exchanges were leading to breakthrough developments in medicine, agriculture, and space travel. The crisis had become a catalyst for unprecedented cooperation. "We're proving that diversity is strength," she continued, "that what makes us different makes us valuable to each other." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. His student had become a leader, a voice for those who'd been silenced by circumstance or prejudice. The day before the wedding, Marcus received an unexpected visitor, Ambassador Reeves. The man who'd brought him to Nereth with such disdain stood in his office looking considerably humbler than their last meeting. "I came to apologize," Reeves said without preamble. "I treated you as expendable, as furniture. I was wrong." Marcus studied him for a moment. "You were following protocol. Protocol based on prejudice. The Nereth intimidated us with their technology, their longevity, their apparent superiority. We responded by dehumanizing ourselves, making ourselves small and quiet to avoid giving offense." Reeves paused. "You showed us we could stand as equals. That human insight and intuition had value even here. I just refused to be invisible." "Exactly. And in doing so, you changed everything." Reeves placed a box on the desk. "Earth's government asked me to deliver this." Inside was Marcus's military insignia, not just restored, but upgraded. Full commander's rank, with commendations for service above and beyond duty. There was also a note from Earth's president: "Your commission is reinstated with full honors. You may serve Earth wherever you are." Marcus looked at the insignia for a long moment, then carefully closed the box. "Thank them for me. But my service now is to something larger than any one world." Reeves nodded, understanding. "I thought you might say that. Good luck, Commander. Or should I say, Prince Consort." "Just Marcus," he replied. "I'm just Marcus." The wedding itself was a marvel of cultural fusion. Held in the palace's great garden, it combined Earth's tradition of exchanged vows with Nereth's ritual of joined consciousness achieved through technology that let Marcus and Lyra share thoughts directly for a brief, overwhelming moment. In that instant, he felt her completely, her years of isolation, her joy at finding connection, her love that transcended species and circumstance. When they kissed, sealing the union, The garden erupted in a display of bioluminescent flowers that responded to emotion, a Nerith wedding tradition that painted their joy in living light. Agent Silas served as Marcus's best man, while a young Nerith girl named Taya, the initiative's first graduate, stood with Lyra. The ceremony was broadcast across the galaxy, with commentary in 40 languages and universal sign. It was estimated that over 3 billion beings watched a human, and Nerith joined their lives, a union that would have been unthinkable just years before. At the reception, Queen Sarath pulled Marcus aside. "You know what this means," she said quietly. "Your children, should you have them, will be something new, neither fully human nor fully Nerith." "They'll be both," Marcus corrected. "The best of both." The Queen smiled. "I hope you're right. The galaxy needs bridge builders now more than ever." As the celebration continued around them, Lyra found Marcus standing on their favorite balcony, looking out over the city. "Regrets," she signed. "None," he signed back. Only that it took so long to find you." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the triple moonrise paint the city in impossible colors. Below them, the capital celebrated not just a wedding, but a new era, one where difference was strength, where silence could speak louder than words, where connection mattered more than convention. "There's something else," Lyra said eventually, her voice carrying a note of mischief. "Something I haven't told you." Marcus turned to her, eyebrows raised. "The neural disruptor that hit you, it did more than just scramble your nervous system. Our medical scans show it actually enhanced certain neural pathways. Your pattern recognition, your ability to process multiple data streams, your linguistic capabilities, they've all increased by approximately 30%. Marcus stared at her. "I'm augmented." "Accidentally. Yes. You're probably the only human who can fully process Nerith quantum state communications. Which is convenient, because I've been asked to lead a new initiative establishing communication with the Deep Travelers. The Deep Travelers were legend beings who existed partially in subspace, whose attempts at communication had never been successfully decoded. If they could establish contact..." "When do we start?" Marcus asked. "Tomorrow. Our honeymoon is a research expedition to the edge stations, where the travelers have been detected." Marcus laughed, really laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. "Most couples go to a beach resort." "We're not most couples," Lyra reminded him. "We're the bridge between worlds, the speakers for the silent, the ones who refuse to stay quiet." She was right. Of course. They were something new, something unprecedented. A human and a Nerith, bound by love and purpose, preparing to push the boundaries of communication even further. The next morning, as their ship departed for the edge stations, Marcus stood with Lyra on the observation deck. Behind them, Nerith shrank to a jewel among stars. Ahead lay the unknown new challenges, new languages to develop, new connections to forge. "Ready?" Lyra asked, taking his hand. Marcus thought about his journey from disgraced officer to palace translator, to prince consort, to pioneer of impossible communication. He thought about the silence he'd been condemned to, and the voice he'd found within it. He thought about the conspiracy that had brought him here, and the love that had made him stay. "Ready," he said, squeezing her hand. The ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward whatever came next. In the observation lounge, a plaque had been installed commemorating their mission. It read in both Nerith script and Earth Standard, with universal sign notation below. "Communication is the foundation of civilization. In the silence between words, in the gestures between thoughts, in the connection between consciousnesses, we find not what divides us, but what makes us whole. May those who were told to stay quiet find their voice. May those who were overlooked be seen. May the bridges we build today carry the dreams of tomorrow." It was signed by Queen Sarath, Earth's president, and representatives from all 40 member worlds of the new Galactic Alliance. But Marcus's favorite part was the small addition at the bottom, added in Lyra's hand, "For Marcus, who saw me when I was invisible. For Lyra, who gave me purpose when I was lost. For all those who refused to be silenced." As the stars streaked past in hyperspace distortion, Marcus allowed himself a moment of complete contentment. He'd been told to stay quiet, to be invisible, to accept his disgrace. Instead, he'd found love, purpose, and a future that exceeded his wildest dreams. The ghost was dead. Commander Hale was redeemed. But Marcus was finally, fully alive. And in the vast silence of space, he and Lyra would teach the universe new ways to speak. Years later, when historians tried to pinpoint the moment that changed the trajectory of galactic civilization, many would point to the war's end or Harrison's defeat. But those who truly understood knew it began with a smaller moment when a disgraced human soldier, told to stay quiet, chose instead to say hello to a deaf princess in the only language she could see. That simple act of connection, of refusing to let someone remain invisible, had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted. The Silent Voice Initiative grew into the Universal Communication Project. The marriage between Marcus and Lyra led to a dozen other interspecies unions among the nobility. The hybrid children that followed became ambassadors between worlds, their unique perspectives invaluable in negotiations and cultural exchanges. Marcus never did return to Earth except for brief diplomatic visits. His home was among the stars now, wherever Lyra was, wherever their work took them. They successfully established communication with the deep travelers, discovering an entire civilization that existed in phase-shifted reality. They developed sign languages for beings with tentacles instead of hands, for creatures that communicated through color changes, for entities that existed as pure energy. Each breakthrough built on what they'd learned in that palace on Nerith, that communication was about more than words. That understanding transcended language. That connection was the fundamental force that held civilizations together. And in quiet moments, when they were alone on their ship or working late in their laboratory, Lyra would sometimes sign to Marcus, "Thank you for not staying quiet." And he would sign back, "Thank you for showing me I had something to say." The universe, it turned out, had been waiting for their conversation, and once begun, it would never again be silenced.